Levo paused, eyes narrowing as he took in the chaos unraveling before him. One bandit had nearly reached the hedgerow at the bottom of the field, his ragged form bounding through the tall grass like a desperate fox. A cart, some 60 feet away, rattled into motion, gaining speed with two more would-be escapees aboard. He hesitated. Levo was no warrior, and cruelty never sat well with him. But this wasn't about revenge, it was about survival. If these bandits escaped, they'd return with reinforcements, and after what the group had just faced, they couldn't afford another ambush. His decision came swiftly. Drawing upon the wellspring of his metamagic, Levo sprinted forward, his furry ears flaring like banners above him. He raised his hand, fingers dancing with light, and a burst of magic missiles shot forth, each one streaking with unerring precision towards the fleeing bandit. They exploded against his back in bursts of shimmering force. The man screamed, stumbling, but, amazingly, kept running, driven by raw terror. Levo grimaced. The damage had been done, but not enough. With a second pulse of energy, he loosed another surge of arcane might. This time, the spell went wide, screaming over the bandit's shoulder and slamming into the bark of an old elm ahead, splintering it with magical force. From behind him, Zenith caught on. The warlock extended a hand, eyes gleaming with cold calculation. A flash of eldritch energy shot from his palm, striking one of the figures clinging to the back of the wagon. The man tumbled off with a grunt, hitting the earth hard and unmoving. Levo threw a glance at the cart. Zenith had it handled. Refocusing, he unleashed another precise flurry of magic missiles, this time catching the runner squarely. The arcane bolts struck with the finality of judgment. The bandit collapsed in the grass, his escape cut short. The cart now sped down the track, wheels bouncing wildly over the ruts and tufts. At the far end loomed a T-junction in the gravel road. The remaining driver, his mind clouded by panic and the lingering horror of Tarak's monstrous visage, wasn't thinking. He yanked the reins and the horses, half panicked and fully in control, veered hard right onto the road. Gravel scattered like shrapnel, hooves pounding as they rounded the bend. That was all Zenith needed. With poise and perfect timing, he raised his hand once more. A final eldritch blast streaked through the air. The blast caught the last bandit mid-turn. He twisted, then fell awkwardly from the cart, his body tumbling like a rag doll as the horses began to slow, their terror spent. Silence fell, punctuated only by the creak of the cart's wheels and the whisper of the wind through golden fields. Meanwhile, back within the creaking bones of the farmhouse, Tarak's ghostly form drifted soundlessly through the wall, gliding like a phantom into the dim corridor beyond. His incorporeal visage shimmered as it merged once more with his waiting body. He flipped the amulet, anchoring his soul back into flesh. A wave of weakness washed over him. The shift always left him drained, as if some essential strength had been siphoned away. He stood slowly, shoulders sagging beneath the weight of his return. Each step along the hall was measured and weary. As he rounded the bend, his hand brushed the cold stone wall for balance. For a moment his legs faltered and he slumped against the masonry, eyes fluttering. Then, with a will born of battle, he straightened, and his two halves, spectral and mortal, knitted themselves together in a shuddering breath of unity. Down the corridor, the aftermath of the battle lingered. Nemin, John, and Pimin had faced the bandit leader with steel, grit, and a little luck, but peace was a fleeting thing. Without warning, the drawing room door crashed open. Two bandits burst through, faces twisted in desperation, scimitars raised high. They had slipped in through the southern window, left ajar in the confusion. Marge, the maid, had not locked it properly in her panic. Pimin barely had time to raise his shield before the curved blade struck. The steel bit into the top of his shoulder, drawing blood and a grunt of pain. But the halfling was made of sterner stuff. In a swift, practiced motion, he countered with Tulip, his loyal longsword. The blade found its mark with brutal grace, piercing the bandit's side. Blood sprayed in an arc as the man gasped, stunned by the ferocity of the small warrior who had brought him low. Tarak's instincts snapped back into place. His mind cleared, and with a sharp incantation, he unleashed Chill Touch. A spectral skeletal hand surged forth from the ether, its fingers curling around the throat of the second intruder. The bandit froze, a scream trapped in his lungs as death's cold grip closed in. Nemin spun on the spot. A bandit stood next to him, the skeletal hand grasping at his throat. This was too close, far too close. He clenched his jaw, whispered an invocation, and thrust his hand forward. Fire exploded from his palm. A bolt of searing flame hurtled across the room, striking the bandit square in the chest. The force blasted the man backwards, smashing him into the wall. A painting of horses, once galloping peacefully across a painted plain, was torn from its hook and fell atop the body with a muted crack, the frame splintering on impact. Smoke curled from the edges of the scorched bandit's coat. John and Nemin exchanged a breathless glance. Nemin lowered his hand, blinking. "Sorry, John," he muttered. "That one took me by surprise." John gave a slow nod, surveying the motionless bodies. "No matter, Nemin. I believe that's the last of them, at least the ones not running for the hills. Your friends, they're formidable. I've never seen fear like that in a man's eyes." A few quiet moments passed, broken only by the crackle of fire and the soft drip of blood. The front door creaked open. Levo and Zenith stood by the steps of the main entrance, the dust of combat still clinging to them, eyes sharp but their work clearly done. Without a word, Pimin moved off towards the deeper halls of the farmstead, sword in hand. There might still be rats in the walls. But for now, the storm had passed. Tarak, Zenith, and Levo moved through the hallway in grim silence, dragging the bodies of the fallen bandits out into the courtyard. The blood trails smeared along the flagstones, a grim testament to the chaos that had erupted inside the once quiet farmhouse. As they laid the last corpse near the garden wall, John emerged from the doorway, his brow furrowed. He gave Tarak a solemn nod. "My men will see to the rest, gentlemen," he said, his voice low and steady. "Thank you for your help." Tarak offered a nod of respect, but John had already turned, distracted. He absently reached down and picked up the fallen painting, the one of galloping horses, and held it in both hands for a moment, lost in thought. The frame was splintered at the edge, the canvas wrinkled where it had struck the floor. He tried to hang it back on the wall, but it slumped awkwardly to the side. With a frustrated breath, he adjusted it again, but the damage was done. It would need mending before it could sit straight again. "Nemin, a word, please," John said at last, his tone clipped. The halfling warlock nodded and followed him through the house. As they walked, John began asking a rapid series of questions. Not shouted, not angry, but direct and pointed. His voice carried the weight of a man who had seen too many consequences unfold behind kind gestures. Blood had been spilled on his land, and someone would answer for it. Back in the courtyard, Tarak, Levo, and Zenith turned their attention to the fallen. They knelt beside the bodies, searching for any signs of who these men had been. Most wore the same dull leathers, functional but cheap, and carried blades marked by the same crude blacksmith. Nothing personal, no names, no symbols, just uniformity. These were gang members, disciplined in gear, if not in manner. The leader, however, stood apart. His armor was richer, reinforced leather worked with intricate etchings along the shoulders and chest. There was artistry to the stitching, a flourish that suggested coin or perhaps status. Whoever he was, he held rank among them, but still, no insignias, no sign of allegiance, just blood and silence. Zenith found a small pouch beneath the leader's cloak. Inside were a few silver coins, a single platinum piece, odd among the otherwise rough currency, and wrapped in a strip of oilcloth, a weathered map. Tucked beside it was a small glass orb, no larger than a plum. It shimmered faintly in the early light. As the three examined the map, Nemin returned, brow still furrowed but his pace more relaxed. Tarak held up the parchment. "Nemin," he said, "any idea where this could be?" Nemin took the map carefully, scanning the faded lines and notations. He frowned, then nodded slowly. "Interesting. This could very well be where we're headed. The lake's outline, it's rough, but familiar. And that small square building, I think that might be the old hunter's hut, a resting place for fishermen and travelers long abandoned." He looked up. "Definitely worth investigating." "Tonight, we will stay here," Nemin announced firmly, his eyes scanning the weary faces of his companions. "At first light, we'll make for the lake. I'll guide you to the hunter's hut. After that, I must return. The Duke must be informed, and my duties await." He gave them a respectful nod, then turned and strode back towards the farmhouse, his cloak catching the breeze as he disappeared through the doorway. A moment later, Marge emerged from the shadowed hallway, wiping her hands on a tea-stained apron and offering them a tired smile. "Rooms are ready. Not the softest beds in the realm, but they'll do for the night," she said, beckoning them inside. As the company crossed the threshold, the sound of galloping hooves shattered the quiet. Through the farmhouse's open windows, they could see a half-dozen riders thundering into the courtyard. The soldiers were dishevelled, some half-armoured, others still in nightclothes hastily thrown under leather or mail. One rider swung down from his saddle before the horse had even stopped and rushed towards the front steps, face pale but determined. John met them at the door, his voice low but commanding as he began issuing orders. It was clear now, the wait of this night had not ended. Word was spreading, and the world beyond the lake had begun to stir. Morning came all too quickly. The courtyard was cast in long shadows, the sun still low behind the eastern hills. The stone beneath their boots was cool and damp with the last traces of dawn mist. Birds stirred in the eaves, and the scent of wood smoke drifted lazily from the farmhouse chimney. From a side door, likely the kitchen, Marge emerged, her apron freshly dusted and her hands carrying neatly wrapped parcels. She gave each of them a warm smile as she handed the bundles over. "Some fresh provisions for your journey," she said kindly. "Bread still warm, a little cheese and some dried fruit. It'll see you through the day, I hope." Before they could thank her, John entered from the southern end of the courtyard, leading their horses himself. The animals looked refreshed, manes brushed, coats glistening, eyes alert. "They've been fed, watered, and given a proper brushing," he said, handing over the reins with a quiet nod of respect. "I hope you find what you're looking for out there." He paused, then added, "And if you do, I'd ask you to return here. I've some thoughts of my own about the other locations. Nemin's asked me to continue his line of inquiry while he's away. I'll be ready." The companions mounted up, offering thanks and farewells. As they rode out through the farm's western gate, they noticed something strange. No sign remained of the chaos from the night before. No blood, no bodies. Not even a cracked stone or discarded weapon. It was as if the violence had never touched this place. The day's ride passed in relative quiet, the path easing gently westward through rolling fields, sparse woodlands and sun-dappled glades. With a destination in mind, the journey felt more purposeful, almost serene. Time passed beneath the hooves of their mounts, and the air turned golden as the sun began its slow descent. At last, the lake came into view, wide and placid, its surface mirroring the amber sky. The silhouette of the hunter's hut stood just beyond the tree line, squat, weathered and still. Nemin reined in his horse and looked towards the structure. "I must be away," he said, voice low but resolute. "Return to the farmstead when your work here is done. I wish you success." He offered each of them a look. Something between trust and quiet farewell, then turned his mount and galloped east, vanishing between the trees. The sun kissed the horizon. The lake awaited. The horses slowed as the hut came fully into view, a lopsided structure of grey stone and weather-worn timber. Moss curled around the edges of its slate roof, and ivy had claimed one corner like a green fist. It stood perhaps 30 paces from the water's edge, and though no light burned within, the air around it held a stillness that was almost reverent. The hunter's hut. Levo dismounted first, hand resting lightly on the hilt of his dagger as he approached the door. It creaked open under his push, revealing a single room, a long cold hearth on one side, a broken chair near the centre, and two narrow cots slouched against the far wall. Dust motes danced in the amber light filtering through the slats. It was empty, but not untouched. Levo noticed a stack of firewood next to an old burner and set about lighting it. Tarak stepped in behind him, eyes narrowing. His gaze swept across the stone walls, and then he saw it. Was it a trick of the flame? No. There near the window, a carving. Faint but deliberate. Lines shaped like elvish script etched with care into the wooden beam just beneath the sill. He leaned in. Andagnia chen, guad chenista, bado nedi naoru anon vad achan sen idhu uvanim. He murmured the words aloud, translating as he went. To beat thyself, you must know thyself. Step through the surface not to drown, but to see what lies below. They exchanged glances. Zenith, standing just outside, turned towards the lake. The water shimmered with a strange clarity, almost mirror-like in the fading light. He spotted the fishing boat, old but clean. It was empty. Tarak and Levo joined Zenith at the vessel. "This is an Alicia freshman," Zenith said. "They've been common fishing boats for as long as I can remember. Odd that it's so clean. It's not new. The wood is weathered, the sails stitched, but there's no smell of fish." Tarak's hand drifted to the pouch at his belt, feeling the smooth surface of the orb. Wordlessly, he stepped onto the deck of the vessel, moored gently among the reeds. "What's that?" he said, pointing to a small indent near the mast. He stepped forward and placed the orb carefully into a shallow depression near the bow. For a moment, nothing. Then a tremble beneath their feet. The boat rocked softly, then stilled, and began to move. No oar touched water, no wind stirred the sail. Yet it glided silently across the surface, as if drawn by invisible hands. Nemin followed quickly, boarding with care. The lake accepted them without sound. The reflection of the sky grew brighter, then darker, then strange. What had mirrored the golden hues of sunset now shimmered with deeper tones, silver, violet, a faint suggestion of stars, even though none yet shone in the sky above. As the boat neared a small island at the lake's center, little more than a ring of rock and twisted trees, a faint mist clung to the ground like a warning. Then the keel scraped gently on stone. Levo stepped off the boat, grateful to be on solid ground. The moment his feet touched earth, a ripple echoed across the lake. Ahead stood 3 massive stone holds framing a circular mosaic. At the center of the design was an altar. To the north, a strange statue loomed, and 4 tall pillars reached into the sky, but supported nothing. As Levo stepped forward carefully along the small wooden bridge leading from the boat to the ornate stone floor, something emerged from one of the pillars opposite them. Himself, a mirror image, same armor, same gear, but the eyes were wrong, cold, unfeeling, as if their own reflections had taken on life, but none of their soul.